Hello, everybody. We are live with our very first episode of Sparks in the Dark. My name is Todd Nesloni. I am half of this duo. I am an elementary principal in Navasota, Texas, and co-author of the book, Kids Deserve It.
Hi, I'm Travis Crowder, and I am a 7th grade English and social studies teacher in Hidnite, North Carolina. This is going to be my 10th year of teaching. I'm super excited about starting this year off because Todd and I have been talking a lot recently about how we can inspire kids to read more, write more, and how we can get teachers to start having more conversations about the powerful acts of reading and writing.
Well, and it's always funny how these kind of things come to be, especially for us. I mean, Travis, we've never even actually met in person.
No, we haven't.
Yet, which is so weird when you talk to people. I mean, I think for us, it's kind of more normal because so many of our people we connect with every day are people we've either met only once or twice or not met at all.
Right, we reach out to each other on Twitter, on Facebook, on something to try and get, ideas to spark some sort of conversation about what we're doing in our classrooms, how we can inspire people around us and get inspiration for each other, actually.
Yeah, and it's funny how we connected because just so that you listening or watching know, Travis and I, we have a mutual friend and a great friend of ours named Jennifer Lagarde. She is absolutely fantastic. I love her. I know Travis adores her as well. But Jennifer had told me a little bit about Travis, and I connected with him online because I'd really gotten into a bunch of research and interest in reading and writing instruction and how to really grow that. And so I reached out to Travis, started connecting with him. And then he became like my go-to for book recommendations because I guess my reading library was not diverse enough in every aspect.
It wasn't.
So Travis became like my I don't know what the word would be.
I became your reading mentor, actually, was what I became. Because I gave you professional reading suggestions. I gave you chapter book suggestions, things that you could share with upper elementary students. And, we even swapped some ideas because you gave me then some things I could share with my middle schoolers.
Exactly. And it was such a neat relationship that we formed of just being able to talk about books and talk about writing and not only for ourselves and what we were reading and what I was sharing with Travis of what I was doing at my school, but then that conversation kind of molded into kind of just us talking about our beliefs about reading and writing and what that looks like not only for the adult or the educator, but also what it looks like in a classroom or school.
And I think that this is a really powerful thing to mention here, Todd, because when two people or a group of people come together and talk about books that they love, powerful conversation will emanate from that. It's impossible to talk about books and not leave with something that is going to encourage you to go further with your reading life, to encourage you to go further with your writing life. And so I think that's what made this, that's why we had such a strong foundation when we started talking, because we were just two people who loved books and we came together and we started talking about them. And then from there, we set the way for a wonderful history.
Right. Well, it was such an interesting conversations too, because you're from the secondary world. All your experience is in secondary, right?
Right. It is. It is. I actually student taught in a high school. My college, all of my training had been in college was high school related, with a little bit of middle school in there every once in a while. But I had this dream that I was going to teach high school. But whenever I graduated and actually started looking for a job, the only job I could find was one teaching middle school. I took it, and I said at that time it was against my better judgment. But now I know it was in my best interest to go ahead and start taking that job because all of these opportunities have opened up for me, and I learned that I loved being in the middle.
And and all my experiences with elementary, and it was even what I find even more interesting about kind of my path lately with my love and falling in love with this reading and writing instruction too, is that I taught math for 7 years in elementary, and so I was never that reading guy. Yeah, I love to read on my own, but it was very much of a this is a math class, we're going to do math. I mean, I was that stereotypical math teacher of, we're not going to bring in reading, we're not going to write. And then the last couple of years in the classroom, I started doing more writing with my math students. And then when I became principal of an elementary campus, and that just kind of, I had to have that bigger mindset. And as I started to do research and find all this out, it really my own personal love for reading and writing grew into me seeing how I can educate kids. And that's what I love in the conversations that we have, is that so much of it isn't, there's not those boundaries of, well, this has to happen at an elementary school, and well, that has to happen only at a secondary. I think you would agree, Travis, that, you know, all of our conversations, we see like time and time again that these things we're talking about when it comes to reading instruction and writing instruction, they're applicable regardless of the age.
Absolutely, they are. And, you know, it's funny you talk about like that traditional mindset of being a teacher. When I first started teaching, I did what I assumed all English teachers did, which was you read a little bit, you write a little bit, you turn in something, you get graded on whatever it is that you turn in. And that is just a cycle that you repeat over and over and over. But what I began looking at 8 years after teaching was no one was leaving my classroom with a love of reading. No one was leaving, and no one was passionate about writing. You know, several students would come back and talk to me about, you know, I really like this that we read in your class, or this book really helped me see this, that, and the other. But those students coming back were few and far in between. I didn't get a lot of students who just, you know, left with this burning desire. As soon as school is out, I've got to go get this book and this book and this book, because I didn't have a chance to read it while I was in Mr. Crowder's classroom. And that was eye-opening for me. And I know that your experiences were eye-opening for you. And I think that's why at this point,
well, you know, and we were able to write a post together because, you know, I know you're not going to brag on yourself, but one thing that I will tell our listeners and viewers is that, you know, in my opinion, Travis is in the top realm of bloggers that I like. I will read every single post that you read. I know your one that you just wrote about independent reading in the classroom was like mind-blowing to me, and I talk to you all the time about these things.
Right.
So being able to read that out there in a form that I could share with others. And, you know, when we had the opportunity to write together too, it was such a neat partnership. Because I think, you know, you tend to kind of bring a lot of that research side in of things. And, you know, for me, that's not one of my writing strengths. When I write.
Well, you know, that's okay, because, you know, what we do is you are, you know, I think it's just because I feel like whenever I talk to people, they want to know, you know, why is it that you're doing this? Other than saying, I know it works because I've tried it, and I trust, you know, that, you know, the people who have done this, I say, you know, this is why I do this, because, you know, there's this research out there. That's the only reason I do that.
Well, and, you know, and we wrote together. It was such a cool partnership, right? Together.
Nice.
That, you know, that's kind of where, you know, our book that we're writing, Sparks in the Dark, that's kind of where that came from, is when we started talking about these beliefs that we had, and then we wrote together and saw kind of how our two very different writing styles meshed in a neat way. I think that's kind of where we decided, you know what, this is something that we either have been passionate about a lot, or have just grown that such interest and passion in, that we were like, let's take this and really develop this into an idea we can put into a book.
Right. And, you know, I think another thing that is worth mentioning to listeners, to viewers, to, you know, anyone who's checking in for this, that we've had so many people reach back to us, you know, reach back out to us after we've written something, especially after our co-authored post, Destructive Reading and Writing. I know I've had a lot of teachers reach out to me about my independent reading post, and it just lets us know, you know, it confirms what we thought before, that so many people are still wanting to have these conversations about reading, and a lot more are wanting to have conversations about writing too, which makes it even more of a timely issue, something to say, this is what we've done, this is what we believe. We want to share that with you.
And, you know, and that's kind of the whole idea behind the book, Sparks in the Dark, is that we wanted a one central place where the melding of Travis and Todd's ideas could be to really just talk about, what our beliefs are about quality reading and writing instruction and what we've learned, but also like give you good takeaways and good things that you can do, whether you are a campus administrator, whether you are an elementary teacher, regardless of the subject area, or whether you are a secondary or post-secondary teacher, and even where you are as an adult, period, and how you can increase your own reading and writing skills.
Absolutely. Because one of the things that, you and I have talked about repeatedly is that regardless of where you are in your teaching life, we're still all learning and we're still all growing. And I, I, you know, I can say that for myself, and I'm not going to speak for any other teacher, but I know if I'm having that, these epiphanies, even at this point, even though I've not taught that long, I really feel that there are other teachers out there who are having those as well, who are saying, I've taught this way for a while. It isn't inspiring my students. What can I do to get them inspired? What can I do to get them thinking in terms of reading and writing and carry that with them?
And I think it's one thing that we are really talking a lot about too is that we don't have all the answers either.
No, we don't.
And then that kind of leads into where getting this podcast started. Travis and I both love connecting with different people and learning from them, whether it is through their writing, connecting with them on social media, or anything like that. And when Travis and I were talking about different ways that we wanted to kind of spread this message outside of just the book, or just what we share on our podcast and things like that, we thought having this place where we could sit and have these conversations would be a fun avenue.
Absolutely. And bringing people in to talk about things that have, helped them as they've, grown in their reading and writing lives, authors, teachers, professional voices in our field who can say, this is what has worked for me. And this is what I have seen work for other people. Because, what we want to do is, even though these conversations with you, Todd, are amazing, it can't stop here.
No.
And we want it to go out and, it to reach other people, regardless of where they are and who they are and how far they are in their teaching lives. Let's get people talking.
And so I'm so excited because we actually have our first guest this week that we're going to have on. Do you want to kind of tell them a little bit about who it is?
Yes. All right. So on Wednesday of this week, we will be hosting Tiffany Jackson, who wrote the book Allegedly, which Todd and I both liked. Our mutual friend Jennifer Lagarde read it, and we all talked about how compelling it was, but how in the end we all just, we were frustrated. we were angry. We didn't know what to make of it, but
we're still digesting it.
Right, still digesting it.
I'm still trying to figure out, like,
was it a month ago?
About this?
A month ago that we read this, and we're still trying to, get past the. That one was difficult. That one was difficult. It was a great read. Tiffany Jackson is a gifted author.
Yes.
And clearly, to be able to start off immediately with this narrative that just continues to build and developing empathy. All right, developing empathy for these different people in her book. It's just a wonderful novel. And if you haven't.
And one thing that is really important too, I think, Travis, is that one of the reasons why we really wanted her as one of our first guests is because, in my opinion, a good book is a book that moves you. That moves you to some kind of emotion, whether that's joy or it's heartbreaking or it frustrates you, or just one of those books that you just can't let go of, that it entrenches itself in you. And I think when we were talking about, like, how do we want to start this? Who do we want to have first? It was a name that kind of came to both of our minds because the book was just, it was brilliant. It was unexpected. I couldn't stop. And even now, and I finished it, 3 weeks ago, and I still can't stop thinking about it when I think about books. And to me, that's the kind of book that I want to talk about. And I know having her on, I want to talk about with her, how was that writing process, and why did you choose these characters, and how can our educators and our teachers bring these kind of things into the classroom? Because that book definitely is not for elementary. It's probably just for high school, like juniors and seniors, but it's one of those that I was like, I'm so glad I read it, but I'm so frustrated still.
Right. Because now you're like, I don't have any students around me I can share this with.
Exactly.
Now all I can do is fuss at Travis. But, a thing that I'm going to mention too here is that art is meant to be reactionary. Let me say that differently. We are meant to have a reaction to art. And I think if we're talking about it, if it affected us and then we're talking about it, then it's serving its purpose, because not only did it, make us feel something deep inside, but now we're wanting to talk about it and share it with other people. And that's what we want to do with this podcast.
Exactly. And I think that's the perfect way to describe it, Travis, is that we want to create a space to talk with other educators and authors and people who are trying to inspire through reading and writing, but also give actionable takeaways for educators who are watching this, whether you are, like I said, a principal, elementary, secondary, post-secondary, doesn't matter. We want to make sure that when you watch this podcast that you can leave with something to take and either digest and think about or implement right away in your school or classroom.
Absolutely.
And so, did you want to talk about, kind of, Travis, why we felt like this was the time for this?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to hopefully go into a little bit more depth here. Considering the people who have reached out to us and knowing that they are asking us, how is it that you infuse writing into your curriculum? How is it that, or into your classroom? How is it that you take time to read for however long every day? I know that personally, I read at least 20 minutes with my students every day, or they read, and I use that time to go around and conference with them. How is it that you do that? What do you do about, parents? What is it that you, say with your principal or any administrator in your building? How do you get them on board with that? And I just feel that knowing that all of these questions are coming to me, teachers are wanting to talk about this issue. They know that, there's a better way. They know there's a great way to teach ELA, but this isn't just limited to English teachers. This is for all content area teachers. And how is it that we can bring and build, or how can we bring into our classroom independent reading time? How can we create a classroom library for those students? I know if the teachers who have reached out to us about these issues, they're the ones doing it. I know there have to be other ones wanting to know the exact same thing.
Well, and we figured too, kind of one way that we wanted to end and talk about at the end of this first episode that we're doing is, since Travis and I, we're writing this book about reading and writing instruction. We've been talking about it with you guys now here for a little bit. We thought, what better way to end our first podcast, and that we're going to end every podcast, is just with some recommending of some books.
Can I interject something right quick?
Of course.
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. The other thing I was going to mention about why we're doing this now is so many school systems and so many, districts are going for a program to fix reading. And we're going to, going through, I'm just going to go ahead and say it honestly, to fix reading scores. And research shows, Todd, you know this as well as I do, that nothing will fix a reading deficit except reading. Mm-hmm. And that goes with meeting students where they are, meeting them at their level, handing them a book that said, giving them an free range of choice, just saying, here are all of these wonderful reading options that you have in my classroom. I want you to, here's one about this, here's another book about this, book talking things for students, giving them a chance to read, to become invested in a text. No program will ever supersede that. And I feel like the more I hear about, programs being initiated in schools, we're forgetting that nothing will ever replace a child sitting down with a book, getting lost in it, and finding a book love that he or she didn't know they had.
I couldn't agree more with that. So, and moving into this last part, Travis, let's talk about a professional development book that you think like every teacher should check out.
All right. So this is Right Beside Them by Penny Kittle. This one has
Penny. Oh, Penny.
I know. I'll try not to gush too much, but this one is one that has really been in many ways a lifesaver. If you're not familiar with Penny Kittle's work, I would suggest that you do yourself a favor, order several of her books right now. She's amazing. Her classroom stories are just great. She has a wonderful way to talk about reading and writing. This one, Right Beside Them, is all about the writing process. She has another one called Book Love. So if you have not had a chance to read either of these, I would suggest that you do.
Well, my PD book that I would recommend for all educators would be Donna Lynn Miller's The Book Whisperer. I know a lot of you have probably heard of it, but that is the book that changed my world when it came to understanding what true reading instruction could look like and how you can build that book love into kids. And I read that as an administrator, and that's when it was like, boom, my mind was blown.
Right. What a call to arms, right? I mean,
exactly. And and what I love about it too is now both of us can call Donna Lynn Miller, a great friend of ours, is that she lives and breathes what that book says. Like, it wasn't something she just wrote because she'd heard about it, or she's like, oh, I'll try this. Or, oh, no, when you talk to her, you can see that that is every part of her heart in the book. And I have read that with my staff, with other people, and it's just one of those books that I love picking back up and going back through, just because there's so much meat in there.
Absolutely. I wanted to mention this one too, The Reading Zone by Nancy Atwell and Anne Atwell Merkel. I feel like this is, most people know Nancy Atwell from her writing her seminal work, In the Middle, which was amazing. Positing all of these amazing ideas where for so long, I mean, it was really against the grain whenever it was first published. But whenever she wrote the Reading Zone, it really shows to me, it's a more intimate look at the reading side, like getting into that zone. How is it that we can help kids become much more passionate readers? And, I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say this often, probably in the podcast that we do, but your students will not have a reading life if you don't have a reading life.
Yep.
So that reading zone is as much for us as educators as it is for our students whenever we invite them to read in our classrooms.
Well, and I love that you talk about that, because that's the next thing we're going to talk about is, creating our own reading lives. So if you were to recommend a book, Travis, that you think every educator, like a chapter book, that every educator should read with rich characters, that teaches, that builds the empathy, what book would you recommend?
I would recommend, there's a, swath of literature out there that is going to be effective, but, is that my time?
Me at school recording this.
But All American Boys by Jason Reynolds, and it was co-authored by with Brendan Kiley. I know I'm probably murdering his last name, and I apologize. I know that's terrible. But the book being just a wonderful, let me take that back, not wonderful, a great way for readers to see how many disparities we still have between races or among races in our country. It's just a really good look, and I think that reading that really gives you a different idea. It really gives you much different insight into this conversation about race that we're having. I think it's one that we need to be having. We need to be pushing books into the hands of our kids that, talk positively and reflect positively people of color, because that's something that, especially in the area where I live in a rural area, they do not have access to that kind of diversified living.
Yeah, you're exactly right, and that leads into mine. I think, and I talk about this everywhere, that if there's one book that I'm going to recommend for an adult, it would be The Hate U Give by Angie Thomas. That book changed my life. And that was a recommendation by you, actually, to read that. But just to have this story, because I don't know if you can tell either by listening to me or by seeing me, I'm not a African-American female growing up in an underprivileged neighborhood in upstate America. And so I don't know those backgrounds, and I haven't experienced them. But being able to read the story about a girl who is present when someone is shot right next to her, and then how that affects her and her community and her family and her school, and to just see these disparities that exist within all of that sometimes I'm aware of, and times I haven't been. It broke my heart. It moved me, and I feel like that book is a part of me now, and that's why I talk about it everywhere, because that book I think every single educator should read.
And the thing about The Hate U Give, because I love that book. I did. It's one that I have recommended ever since I read it, because it changed me as well. But the thing that I really feel that we need to be understanding of as educators is, we have students who are coming to us who are not like us. And, we need to, see, or not, and not just for us, we need students who aren't like those characters in that book. Even though I feel that, that there are students who have had similar backgrounds who would gravitate to that, they're not the only ones who need to read it. We need our students who are, I'm going to throw this out there and say have had a privileged lifestyle. They need to be reading it. We need teachers who, have not had discussions about this. They need to be reading it. I'm sorry, I'll step off the soapbox now.
No, well, what's another book then that you would say that every adult needs to read that's really impacted you lately?
Well, I'm going to say Born a Crime by Trevor Noah.
Love that book so much.
I thought it was so powerful. I mean, hearing his story, he was raised in South Africa. His mother black, his father white, and being his, that was a crime, for that sort of or for that mixing of races. And so of course that's where the title Born a Crime comes from. And just hearing him talk and hearing what he had to say, and then talking about, equalizers that we have in our world, it proved to me more and more how important these conversations about race are.
Well, and you can look at somebody like Trevor Noah too, who's now this really successful comedian. He's the host of The Daily Show on Comedy Central. But that book moved me too, because I didn't read it. I listened to it on audiobook, which I loved because he was the reader of it on audiobook. But it's exactly like what you said, like, just to hear, for me, I enjoyed it because to hear the history of South Africa and all the things that were in place that I wasn't aware of, and to see what he went through and to hear that from a personal perspective, it was moving.
Right. And the inequity, the trials, the frustrations that he endured, and then you see him now, looking at him now as a person, you would never be able to tell that he experienced that in his young adulthood. Well, he's still a young adult now, but much younger adult, or excuse me, much younger
person.
Yeah, person, we'll say. Well, you would never be able to say that, or guess at that. But that's what makes, I think, in a way that helped, or didn't help, but that resonated with me as well. Like, he experienced that, but he's been empowered.
Well, there was another book that I finished 2 weeks ago, and it was All Rise for the Honorable Perry T. Cook.
Yeah, you love that book.
It was by Leslie Connor, and I could not read that book fast enough. I'd never heard of it before. I saw it at a Scholastic Book Fair, and I was like, hey, this looks interesting. But it was about a boy who was raised in a prison. Because his mom was put in prison right when she was pregnant with him, and then by some series of events, the warden adopted him so that he could live at the prison and be near his mother. And then somebody finds out that he's living there. They take him out, and through the rest of the book, you kind of see his relationship with these inmates while he interviews them and learns their true stories, as also the true story about how his mother got convicted. And it was such a powerful book for me to be reminded that everybody has a story.
Right.
Everybody has made decisions in their life that they regret. And some people, based on some of those decisions, their consequences were more severe than others. And so to connect with these characters on such a deep level who were incarcerated, and then to learn their stories and kind of have your mindset shifted about what you had been preconceived about them or things like that. It really reminded me that with the prison right up the road from us, where there's a chunk of my student population whose parents are incarcerated, that it made me want to go and learn more stories of people in those situations and not be someone who is judgmental or who does say, they did the crime, they pay the time. And to see that, every one of us has a story and we all make mistakes and sometimes we end up paying for those more than others. And I really enjoyed the take on the characters. And
I'm just going to say this about all these books that we've mentioned, these fiction books, except Born a Crime. Born a Crime is a memoir, but looking at these, well, even that one, we get glimpses into these worlds of people, and that's so powerful. That's what our students need. Teaching one novel with them, where I pass out a novel around the room, and we spend however many weeks it takes to read that together as a class. That's one book. But if I can get them to read independently and voluminously, think of how many interactions that they'll have with these different types of characters, that just me standing in front of the room guiding them through a book, that's, even though I think there's a place for that, there's so much more that students can be or experience with independent reading.
And that leads us great into how we're going to close this out a little bit more, is that, to be able to do that with kids, you need to be building up your classroom library. Right. So kind of closing out this first episode, Travis and I want to share with you some books that we think would be beneficial in any classroom library, just to kind of give your kids options with characters that they may connect with, but also characters that may be nothing like them, that would be really good for them to read. Because like Travis mentioned earlier, if you're going to be inspiring your kids to read and devour these stories, you have to be a reader yourself and be connecting with these characters. And it doesn't mean you have to love every book that you read so that way you can talk about it, but how can you connect with a 5th grade boy who loves football, but you don't know any football books at all? And so that's where, for me, it's like continually reading these books. And so there were a couple of picture books that I wanted to share first, because I am a huge picture book fan. I don't care what grade that you teach. Kids love to listen to picture books. And
that's so right. The read aloud is so important.
Because, even this year at all of the staff meetings that I'm going to do, every single staff meeting is going to start with a read aloud of me sharing a story with my staff, because everybody loves to hear a great story read to them. So there's 3 picture books that I want to share with you guys. The first one is One by Catherine Otoshi. I love this book so much. Just talking about the power that one person has in changing a life. And it's such a neat way the story is told, that this is one that I read every single year. It's one of the first books I read to all the classes. Another one that I think is super powerful is Ada Twist, Scientist by Andrea Beatty. She has 3 books out. Well, she has more than that, but she's written Iggy Peck, Architect, and Rosie Revere, Engineer. But I love this one the most because I have a very diverse student population. And for them to see about a little African-American girl who wants to be a scientist and all the things she goes through to do that, it was just powerful. And I wrote a post for Scholastic's Reader Leader blog about how me reading this to a class and having a 4th grader come up to me and tell me, thank you for reading it. And I was like, oh yeah, no problem. And to hear her say no, it was really great to have somebody in a story who looked like me. And it's just kind of one of those moments that just connected me on such a level where I was like, I have to be reading books with characters that are diverse. And the last one that I would say is a must read aloud for every classroom, and Travis knows this, we both adore this book, and it's Happy Dreamer by Peter Reynolds. I love everything Peter writes. The Dot, Ish, and he illustrates this as well. He describes this as his autobiography. And I think this is such a powerful, magical story. And knowing Peter personally and getting to meet him and just hear him tell the story of this as well is just such a neat thing. And so if you're going to read any book to a class, I love this story. So I know there's some chapter books too that we want to share, Travis. So before I share a couple of mine, what are some that you would recommend?
One of the books that was really popular amongst my students this past year was one called Because I Am Furniture by Talia Chaltis. And one thing that if you want to share books with your students, but you have some reluctant readers, sharing a book with them that is written in poetry is astounding, because they take it, they read it, they usually get through it quickly, and that helps to build up confidence in them as readers. The thing about my classroom that I noticed was that as the year went on, students who had been reading what I would consider more copious books went more for those books written in poetry, just because they wanted to read outside of the genre that they had really been used to reading. They wanted to read something with a different format. And Because I'm Furniture is about a girl who is abused, but she begins, she's a high school, so of course, age appropriateness here, but she decides that she wants to try out for the volleyball team against the wishes of her father, who is quite abusive. And whenever she does, that helps to build up her confidence as a person. And I thought, what a story of resilience for our students. Because, even though you know, I don't like to think that our students are dealing with things outside of school like that. I know that some of them are. And I feel that this is even for those who aren't experiencing something that I would consider that tragic, I think it's a good way for them to see those types of students, or those types of people. The other one is a book called This One Summer, and it is a little, several years old, I think. Don't quote me on that, but I think. But it's written by Mariko and Jillian Tamaki, and it's a graphic novel. But it shows it's a summer that this one girl spends at a summer house with her parents. And even though it is a graphic novel, and even though I'll be honest and admit that graphic novels are not really my thing, I know that a lot of students love them. And so, this is one of those things where as the educator, I have to decide, if I want to meet them where they are, I have to be able to meet them, with something that I know about, something that, I have an understanding of. So a great coming of age tale, beautifully illustrated, and also just a resounding story. I think teachers and students would love it.
Well, and there's a couple of chapter books that I want to share with you guys that I think you should have on your shelf. One of them is Pax. I adore this. Now, if you read this book, get your Kleenex. You're going to need them, and not just at one part, it's several parts. But this is such a powerful story of a fox and his boy owner, I guess you could say, his adopted parent, I guess. It's such a neat story about friendship, about connecting with someone or something, and finding your way back to them. And I love this story. Another one is Ninth Ward. Now, this is by Jewel Parker Rhodes. Ninth Ward now Jewel writes incredible books. Towers Falling is another one, and Sugar and Bayou Magic, all great. But I love this story about Hurricane Katrina and a girl surviving that. And I just thought it was a great story. And Jewel writes in such a neat way that I just devour her books. And the final one is one that I read this year, and it is called The Someday Birds, and it's by Sally Plough. I was really moved by this book. It's about a father who is in the hospital sick, and the road trip that his kids go on to go see him. And along the way, one of the characters, and it kind of reminds me a little bit of Fish in a Tree, because one of the characters has some unique idiosyncrasies and challenges that he deals with. And just being able to, as he travels, it's called The Someday Birds, because as they travel, this character is trying to catch pictures of all these different kinds of birds before the character gets to his father. And so it was a neat little story. Just to have that, and I loved it. And so those are books that I would recommend. So Travis, I think we have reached the end of episode 1.
Yeah. So what I hope that people who are listening will do, what I hope that because Todd, you and I are doing this as well. Continue to build up your classroom library, regardless of the content area that you teach. Reach out to your students. Listen to them, decide, what kinds of books would these students like? What would they enjoy? And take it to them. Talk them up in your classroom. Give them a chance to browse your classroom library, and trust them to take them home and bring them back. We hear often, and one of my favorite sayings is, I would rather get a reader back than a book.
Yes.
And so I really would prefer to get, that reader back. The other thing that I will mention is take care of your reading life as well. Don't let it go stagnant. We are all in this together as educators. And whenever you are in a room with your kids, they're counting on you. They're counting on all of us. And I mentioned this in my blog post in defense of free choice independent reading, that our students are not waiting on us to get this right. They're going on, they're moving on to the next grade level, they're graduating. But this is our opportunity, and I hope you'll join us on this journey.
And we really hope that you share your passions and your favorite books using the hashtag Sparks in the Dark. Because Travis and I are always looking for great books to read, and we want to create this community online using that hashtag to really share books that are moving us, strategies, resources, tips, all this stuff. And you can follow me. I'm Tech Ninja Todd on Travis. Travis is
at Teacher Man Trav.
And you can also connect with us. We have a Sparks in the Dark Twitter account and a Sparks in the Dark Facebook page, where on our Facebook page, we are constantly sharing different articles and resources and connections with others. So we hope that you check those out as well. But we want you to join the conversation. So if you can think of people who are exceptional leaders in the field of reading and writing, or great authors that we should interview or talk with, we would love your suggestions also. So I guess that's it, Travis. We made it.
I think we've said it.
So we want to leave you with a challenge. Your challenge for this episode is to share out your favorite book that you've read in the last 6 months using the hashtag Sparks in the Dark.
We look forward to seeing them.
Talk to everybody soon.
Peace out.